And now I would like to invite Ivan Owen to tell us about his innovation. Ivan was the winner in the collaboration in the category of collaborators.
Would it be all right if I place this on the table?
Yes.
I appreciate it. I'm being difficult. Because I forgot to actually print my notes, so I have them on my computer. Okay. Is there a way to see on the screen here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Was opening the wrong presentation.
Okay. Excellent. Oh yeah, this is working. Thank you. All right. So I wanted to first start by thanking the foundation and the other organizers of this event, the patient innovation team, and congratulate all the other winners that are here in person today, and as well as Louis, who's watching at home. Felt very very glad to have been able to meet everyone involved. So I'm going to just skim over a little bit of the background of what has happened in the field of open source printable prosthetics. Thanks to Eric going over a bit of it earlier, that gives me some time to discuss more in detail how the innovation takes place within this community that has become a global community. But as Eric mentioned, this started with, for myself personally, in a rather unusual way, which is through creating artistic props for theater and stage productions and very low budget movies. You know, if you've ever seen one of those awful monster movies where there's some guy in a furry monster suit, you know, I make the sort of stuff that goes inside of those suits to make them seem more lifelike. So definitely not anything that would star Brad Pitt or anything like that. So this was then seen, as he mentioned, by a carpenter named Richard Van Os from South Africa, who had been trying to build his own device. And so we worked together to see if I might be able to take what I had learned through creating things like puppets and mechanical props, and then combined with his experiences for what he wanted to replace as far as what he lost. You know, our target was to build an index finger. So that he could operate things like electric drills and that sort of device. And together we collaborated via the internet. We initially got it to the point where we had a single index finger that was capable of fairly dexterous movement. So here you can see that's him testing our prototype to pull a toothpick out from a container. This was built just with the kinds of shop tools that we were both familiar with as craftsmen. So things like electric drills, hand tools, etc. And we used components like things from, in the States we call it a Rector set. Over here I think it's Meccano. So it's a children's toy that has steel components and bolts so that you can build all sorts of things. We used that because then, even though we were sending things from email 10,000 miles apart, we would know that we had parts that were the same size. After we shared that video of that one index finger, we were contacted by this wonderful lady, Yolandi Depenar, who also lives in South Africa, because her son Liam happened to have been born without any fingers on one of his hands. And her challenge to us was, well, I see you've made a single finger, maybe you can make an entire set. So then we set about taking what we had learned from that first prototype and creating what was initially a fairly crude prototype. It's what we had the capacity to produce with the tools that we knew. But then somebody suggested that we look into taking this design and then using the technology of 3D printing to produce more detailed components in a lower cost and easier way. So to that end, I reached out to a 3D printing company, a manufacturer of 3D printers in the United States, and told them what we were trying to do, and I was very honest and said that we had no experience in it, but that we really wanted a couple of their machines and we had no money to pay them. So, and luckily for us, they responded very positively and said, okay, you know, so they sent us a couple of machines. What that allowed us to do is, I went online and luckily, because of the world of open source software, there were many 3D design programs that 20 years ago you would have had to pay many thousands of dollars to have access to this kind of three-dimensional design software. But there are now people that are making 3D design programs and releasing them for free, along with instructions on how to use them. And then you don't have to pay to use them, but you do have to put in the time and effort to learn. So I found one of those applications that seemed like it would make sense to me. I learned how to do 3D design, and then we took our prototype and turned it into this printable object. So this is Liam using the second prototype. This time it was printable. And what this really made possible was for us to keep up with him as he grew. Because a child is going to outgrow a device like this if it's made very well to fit them about as fast as they outgrow shoes. And so once you have a three-dimensional design, just like you can stretch and scale a photograph, you can stretch and scale a 3D object in software. So this would mean that we would just have to remeasure his hand after he outgrew the device and then reprint it. So this was a huge leap forward as far as what we were able to do, not only for creating his device, but for prototyping, because now instead of trying to take pictures or videos of what we had made 10,000 miles apart, we could email the files to each other and print it out wherever, in our respective locations, and then see exactly what the other person had been thinking of. So we had this question of, okay, so we have this design. We didn't really have to invest very much as far as the research and development costs, and the question became, what do we do with it? What I thought of at the time was, well, this is an opportunity to maybe explore a different model for the distribution of this device. And just like I had benefited so much from open source software in being able to design it, well, why don't we release this onto the internet and see what happens from there? So we put it online where people could download it, put it on there with a public domain license, and so gave away all of the patent rights. And honestly, there wasn't much of a plan to it. I vaguely hoped that, okay, we'll put this online and then maybe other people will help. That started happening in a very organic way. On the same website where we shared our files, other people started taking the files and playing with them. Some people were just interested in this concept of fingers and hands, and so they started to create improvements. But then something very wonderful happened, and again, this was through YouTube. A lot of this has happened thanks to YouTube and being able to share videos, honestly, which is, demonstrates some of the power of social media and this way in which we can connect with each other across borders now. The man on the left is John Schull, and he's a professor at a university, and his background is open source software. So he saw a video of Liam's hand, and he had the thought, okay, well, I see that there's people that like to make things and people that want to use their 3D printers for something like this, and there's people that are looking for devices. So he thought, well, maybe if we make an online community where people can meet each other online, then people that have 3D printers can connect with people that are looking for hands, and that could be a way for them to obtain them. And so that's how the Enable community was formed. And what happens there is we have a whole range of people, from medical professionals to professional engineers, hobbyists, artists like myself, patients, and their family members, all as members of this community. This allows for multiple tracks of development. In some cases, like in the case of Peter and Peregrine, pictured here, they go off on their own and they create their own innovations and add to the design. So they took the original files and they made a version that they like to call the Talon, because Peregrine's name is from a bird of prey, and so this is like his talon hand. So they made a lot of functional improvements, and then after that, Peter took his knowledge that he learned from improving upon the design and shared it back to the community. There's also a track of development where a user might have an idea. So one of the parents said, the strings are very hard to tie and get to the right length. So that led to taking the design, somebody suggesting a new design for a way to adjust that, and various designers in the community took that challenge and experimented and went through various iterations until we came to a result that would make that process easier, and it got integrated into later models of the hand. Yet another development track is sometimes designers come up with ideas all on their own from their experience as designers or artists that might make things easier. So this is getting closer to the most recent version of the hand, where everything snaps together for the most part. It requires very little metal hardware anymore. Those snap pins came from a designer named Michael Curry, who's just a professional engineer, and he thought, well, maybe if you had a snap pin, that would help. So these processes all come together and result in both a sharing of knowledge globally, across, from emails, etc., but also in person. So now that something is pretty simple to put together, here we have Ben, who's a hand user, teaching his brother how to help him build hands. Ben's mother is then teaching other families. So this is happening in person as well as electronically. And in addition to that, it's also a tool for education. So in universities where they're already doing research into mechanical and electrical engineering, then they take an interest in taking on maybe some more advanced projects around this, things that would be harder to do at home, like exploring using EMG control, electromyography, reading the muscle nerve impulses to control hands, which has already been done, but now they're looking at how do we do this in a lower cost way. And this now means that in the course of 2 years of development, the first prototype cost about 150 euros to produce, 8 hours of assembly, and about 20 pieces of metal hardware. And now here we are. This needs to be updated again, but we're at 40 euros of materials, 3 hours of assembly, and only 8 pieces of metal hardware. And that makes it so that this can happen in many locations, and it's repeatable. So it's starting to spread. Each of these pins represents a person. This could be a member of the community. So it's not where hands have been built necessarily, but where there's community members, and where this exchange of ideas is taking place. And there's a new pin here in Portugal now, actually. So I've been working with one of the members of the patient innovation team, Salome, who's right over there. I'm going to embarrass her, just like Eric likes to embarrass people. And so we've been using the printer there. We encountered a challenge with it. Something went wrong with the machine, so we had to find a solution. As it turns out, MediaMarkt has 3D printers, and they allow you to rent time on 3D printers. So this is a fantastic innovation. I actually don't see this back home in the United States. There's specialized 3D printing shops, but not at a home electronics store. And there we met Paolo, who is the technician that runs the 3D printer in MediaMarkt. Very knowledgeable, super nice guy. When we told him what we were trying to do, he's really dedicated himself to it. And now we'll find out later today if the parts are done printing. So this is what's happening today. And just to backtrack just a short amount, and then I'm a little bit over time, so I need to wrap this up. I like to talk about what also happened yesterday, or in this case, many years back. This is an unknown man. He's not known to history. He's not famous for anything. He's not a famous theologian, but he was a technician. This is Robert Norman, who was a dentist and surgeon in Australia in the mid-1800s. He built a partial prosthetic hand for a man named John Coles, who was a veteran of the Australian military. And John Coles lost 4 fingers in a cannon accident. So Robert built this hand. It took so much time to build. This was carved from whalebone. It would be very difficult to produce in that time. And so it's the only one he ever built. But when I was doing research to build the first model of the printable prosthetic hand, I found this, and it gave me great inspiration. And there's actually some design elements from this hand that now exist in the current hands. And so as you can see here, this progression of design that starts somewhere in the distant past, goes through to a point in time where it can be easily distributed, can have great impact. And it really highlights for me that innovative ideas are extremely powerful. We can never fully know what their impact will be or when they will blossom, but it's through the sharing of them that it creates the greatest potential for them to do so. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today.
And now I'd like to invite Commissioner Carlos Moedas to come to the stage to give the word to Ivan Owen.
Congratulations. So this is the...
Let me hold this. Thank you. Don't leave. Because we, both the OI community as well as the patient innovation community, are very grateful for the presence of the Commissioner here today. So I would also like to invite Ivan Owen, on behalf of all of us, to give an award to the Commissioner. Obrigado.